selection one.
Okay, when and how did you start to play electronic music? I started basically when I moved to Singapore. I started getting into electronic music, probably most likely because I got my first computer that my own one. So I started messing around with Ableton Live, and then doing processing of cymbals and other stuff. So still attached to the live aspect, and then started getting into like no input mixer systems with effects and things like that. So this all started about 2006, and then about 2010 or 11 started getting into modular synthesizers, and that's pretty much it. But I've been listening to electronic music for a long time.
For me, it's been a long sort of journey. I first discovered a friend of mine had a 7-inch record of Gottfried Michael Koenig, one of his function pieces. And I heard this when I was probably 13, 14, and it really just changed the way I thought about sound. So I kind of went down to the local pawn shop, and this was back in the days when analog gear was everywhere. Everyone wanted like digital synths, so you could buy analog gear really cheap. I bought myself a Univox Maxi Korg for $70. A week later, I bought myself a Moog Prodigy for I think $50, and started working with it. Did my undergrad in electronic music at the Art Institute of Chicago. Went to grad school for electronic music. I studied acoustics with Jean-Claude Rizet. Did graduate work with Kurt Rhodes. Worked with as musical assistant for Eliane Radigue and Luc Ferrari. So when I lived in France, so I have a kind of long tradition of sort of classic electronic music. Yeah.
Okay, question 2. What are your favorite musical styles and artists? My sort of background's in jazz and rock music, and I play the drums. So everything kind of stems from that. You can't avoid music that's around you as a kid. So I grew up with soul music around the house. My dad was really into that. And then after that, starting into drumming, so then got into like Jimi Hendrix and the Doors and Led Zeppelin and all these kind of 60s, 70s bands. And then I was about 18. I started at conservatorium and did jazz studies on drums. So I got really heavily into jazz during that period, in sort of early 20s, and then started listening to more experimental avant-garde. Got into really like John Zorn stuff and Anthony Braxton. That kind of opened the doors for me to more experimental music. And around the same, in my 20s, started listening to contemporary classical music. People like Feldman, things like that. And then, just got more into improvising and into my 30s. More free improvisation, free jazz, things like that. And of course, electronic music. And hip-hop was probably the first electronic music that I really listened to. I mean, as a kid, I used to listen to Kraftwerk, but I didn't know it was Kraftwerk. It was just, what song was it? Tour de France. I had it on a compilation, but I really liked the song. So, I just wasn't aware who it was. So that's kind of my journey. Brian?
For me, kind of the piece that really set it off for me was Zeneckis' piece, Concrète Piège, where he has... many people mistake this. They think it's burning embers, which it isn't. It's actually just charcoal. In France, the charcoal are thin little flakes. So he was pouring out a bag of that, and he manipulated it. And for me, I could really hear the transformations he was doing, and it was kind of a early granular piece, if you will, sort of granular synthesis, which that sound world really seduced me. After that, I was hooked on Zeneckis' music. So I spent a lot of time, studying his music. I worked for him in France. I went to study with him for a month, and then he asked me to become his assistant for about 5 years. For me, Concrète Piège, and then it kind of goes to his piece Bohor, which is kind of a larger scale piece. And then from Bohor, it goes to the magnificent piece Persepolis. They're kind of one linear line of thought that he was thinking. At the same time, he has pieces like Jean Trois, Gendi 3, which dealt a lot with his Gendi program, General Dynamic Stochastic Synthesis, where you couldn't exactly control all of the parameters. You could kind of set data sort of boundaries, which is something I do with the analog synth. I'm very into sort of the make noise woggle bug and the Richter noise ring. I like these things that you have to kind of work with. You can kind of pull them into a direction, but you're never exactly sure where it's going to go. A little, it's kind of like herding cats. You kind of can tell them where you want them to go, but they're not exactly going to go there. So Xenakis' stuff, Stockhausen's pieces, of course, Telemusic. I spent a lot of time analyzing and listening to Telemusic. Those are two very formal composers. And on the other side, like I mentioned before, Gottfried Michael Koenig's, like the sound world he had. When I was in France too, I followed some of the courses of Horacio Vagione, who a lot of people won't know because he doesn't really release stuff, but he's probably one of the greatest composers, living composers. His work is exceptional. Again, dealing with sort of granular sound, and his earlier pieces from when I was living in France, he actually would cut hundreds and hundreds of small sound files, and kind of like a Georges Seurat painting with all the little dots, he would just drag them out and meticulously place them in the timeline. So he was influential. Kurt Rhodes, who I mentioned before too, his piece Clang Tint was very influential on me. Also Half-Life, those pieces were very sort of made me reevaluate the way I kind of make sound and put sounds together.
Okay, next up.
Free.
What is your first synth electronic music instrument? Well, probably some small sampling keyboard from, I think, Casio. Again, I can't remember which one it was, but I had it as a kid, and I used to like making my own songs on it and messing around. And also, I used to have this. It was another recording device, but it had built-in effects like spaceship sounds and
Oh man, do you still have that? Like, bring that out.
Yeah, that was really cool. So that's where I kind of got started then. But then, got into more laptop stuff after that. We're talking like 20 years later or something.
For me, it was the Univox MaxiCorg. That was the first analog synth I had, and then, like I said before, I bought a Moog Prodigy not long after that. And then when I was at the Art Institute, they still do, beautiful EMU modular, like silver beauty. So I started working with that, and they also had a Sandin image processor, which is a video synthesizer. So you kind of have the audio and visuals both driving the same thing. And they also had an ARP 2600, which I spent many a night kind of locked in the studio playing with that. It's a wonderful instrument as well.
So first modular synth module system. I started off with a few modules. I think I wrote it. It's more accurate in my email, but it was I think I got the Metasonics R54, the Livewire Dalek modulator, and the Vulcan. It's dual LFO. I got the Woggle Bug, the Noise Ring, Mod D Mix, and the Mutagen IntelliGel mixer module, and the maths, make noise maths. So that's kind of what got me started.
For me, I was kind of searching the internet, looking at Dumpfer modules and things like that. And what really kind of set me off was the Make Noise Woggle Bug. I discovered that kind of online, and I think this is even before there's like forums and stuff for it. This is many years ago. And the Woggle Bug just intrigued me. Like, Tony's graphics on it are amazing. Hold on. But yeah, Tony's graphics, the way it's laid out, where he doesn't have it labeled, I'm kind of into that stuff. Not long after that, about like the noise swash and the maths and some of the early Livewire stuff, like the AFG, which is probably still one of my favorite oscillators. The DPO kind of is awesome too, but the AFG has a very classic sound and feel to it. So I would say the Woggle Bug was my first kind of guy.
Number 5. I don't know. We're keeping our eyes out. Interested in granular synthesis, so looking for someone to kind of nail a granular module. There's a few out there, but apart from that, because we do so much traveling, we're not just going crazy getting everything. Like to work with certain modules, and we're more performative. So we take time patching up, but it's more about how we interact and stuff. So yeah, we want to just keeping our eyes open. So nothing in particular. Just see what's good. Probably the same.
Yeah, mine's the same. Granulation modules, especially like a constant Q granulation module would be nice, which Kurt Rhodes talks about in his microsound book, where each grain has a filter on it. Not just the granular stream having a filter at the end, but every individual grain. I'm sure it'll be very difficult to do, but that would be nice.
Okay, so number 6, what is your expectation of future modular synth design? I think 2 things. I think basically at some stage, probably soon, they'll run out of reissues of classic analog gear. I think that'll continue to be a direction. I think more digital and analog hybrids will be a direction. Getting the sort of processing power and flexibility of computers into the modules. That's where
I'd say the same. More digital analog hybrids. I'm not a purist in any way. I think you can do lots of interesting stuff. Just like look at the Echophone or the Photogene, such expressive modules that you can really play. And they're hybrids, and I think that's great. So more of that, hopefully.
Yeah. So I think basically what you can do with computers, I think eventually, will start coming. It's already happening, so it'll go in that direction. Okay, how are the electronic music and electronics experimental sound scenes in Singapore? It's a small scene. It's quite a small scene. We're quite active in this group and another group called Game of Patience, which is acoustic, free improvised. Brian plays bass. I play drums with another sax player who's coming to Tokyo tonight. We're going to start a tour, and then different configurations. I organize gigs under the banner of Chopper Experimental Music Series, and that kind of spaced around people getting in touch and wanting to come to Singapore and do a gig. And I've done 2 festivals, larger festivals under that banner. We also work at La Salle College of the Arts, full-time lecturers. So we have a lot of artists in residence who come in, work with the students, and then we organize stuff with that. That's been really good. And there's other people organizing stuff, so it's quite good. It's quite strong. Like it's small but quite strong and supportive. There's no sort of animosity or competition. Everyone's getting together and helping each other out, which is really great.
Yeah, everyone's genuinely interested, I think, in what everyone else is doing. So it's not. I think that's a good way to put it. It's not a competitive scene. We're kind of working together to kind of bring this to people.
Okay, number 8.
Yeah.
What visual gears were you using with your sound and music? Over to Brian.
Yeah. I use everything in the kitchen sink. So, like I said, I started out with the Sendy image processor. I've used a Etra scan processor before. I did some work with Woody Volsuka when I was living in Germany. Woody and his wife Stena. We did some things together, and if their stuff is amazing. Like they're kind of visual art pioneers for the type of stuff I'm interested in. Use a lot of video feedback. I still use analog devices. We have some custom-made boxes that transform our audio signals into visuals, and then I run that through a computer, just running some VJ software. Like a lot of times I use VDMX, which is great software, or Resolume, things like that, and kind of have the peak detection, especially in VDMX when sound comes in. So it's very reactive, the sound and the image. So we have this box translating our sounds into images, but if there's a filter on it, say, it's also listening to what we're doing.
And last question, what does electronic music sound mean to you? That's a big question. I think for us, you know, what's the gear isn't really that isn't important. You know, what for us it's about improvisation. You know, our shows, for all the stuff we do, it's all improvised. So it's a means to an end. You know, the equipment. You know, we love the modular gear, but you know, we're not sort of collectors just for the sake of collecting or having things just for having them. You know, we use them because of their function and the kind of sounds, and we like to kind of use them in ways they're not meant to be used, things like that. So yeah, that's, I don't know, what would you say?
For me, it's an interesting thing. So being a contrabass player, I'm very interested in sort of extended techniques and extending the sort of sound palette of my instrument, which I know Darren also does with his drums. We use lots of sort of ways to kind of make new sounds. And it's an interesting kind of other side of the coin when you're working with sort of electronic music, because you have to set those boundaries for yourself. You know, there's only a finite amount of time that I can play, and I've had this in gigs where I'm playing with people who are playing laptops or electronic instruments, and they all look around, they're like, yeah, and I'm like bowing my ass off. I'm like, come on guys, I can't do this forever. So for me, the interesting of electronic music is setting up those boundaries. You know, it's kind of not like wandering in the desert in whatever direction. It's like, this is what this piece is, this is what this group is. You know, it might be something else with other people you perform with, but it's just the sort of access to all of these different sort of tones and sounds. You know, if I detached my synth and gave it to 5 different people here, they could come up with 5 completely different types of music. So that's interesting to me, is setting those boundaries of what is your piece of music, especially with electronic music. And in the improvisational aspect with this group and the other groups we do, that's a heavy component. Like, we generally don't talk about what we're going to do before we play. Kind of play each other our patches. So like, these are the kind of sounds I'm working with. But for me, that's a very important thing. Like, I don't like performing solo. Actually, I did a solo gig in Singapore several months ago on the synth, and I think that's my last one. I need someone to feed off of, so when they're making sounds, to react to. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Darren and Bye.
Thank you,
Timmy.
Timmy.
Yeah.
Yay!
Awesome.